Yo, what's poppin' guys, Sizzyl here, and today I'm doing a Pokemon Generation 2 review. So that includes Pokemon Gold, Silver, and Crystal. And for the sake of this review, I played through Pokemon Crystal on the 3DS Virtual Console, but all three games are virtually identical anyway, so that's probably fine. First things first, Generation 2 is a vast improvement over Generation 1. If you guys haven't seen my Generation 1 review, I recommend checking it out in the description. But if you don't want to go watch that, I'll give a quick rundown. Basically, the game had a ton of flaws, didn't have color, and just generally was like a mediocre experience that was made a decent and kind of fun experience purely because it followed the Pokemon formula. On the other hand, Generation 2 just felt like a good experience, and then having that Pokemon formula made it a really good experience. So, first things first, Generation 2 had color. Now this might not seem revolutionary today, but coming off of Generation 1, it is a massive upgrade. Having color on trainers, all the surrounding area, the buildings, the trees, and especially on all the different Pokemon and battles, is such a good visual upgrade and made the game a lot more engaging than its first generation counterpart. On top of that, it had some very basic UI and game changes that made it a lot more fun to play and a lot easier to work with. For example, in Generation 1, one of my biggest problems was when you look at your party, almost every Pokemon shared the exact same sprite, so it was very hard to differentiate which Pokemon was in your party. In Generation 2, they managed to add an individual sprite for every single Pokemon in the game, so they're all very unique, and it's very easy to find the Pokemon in your party that you're looking for without memorizing names. Another thing is that in the PC, which is where you store your extra Pokemon since you can only have 6 in your party, it used to just be a list of the names and genders of your different Pokemon, but now it's a list of the names, genders, and a little sprite showing what Pokemon it is. This changed the PC from being a minute-long to possibly hour-long ordeal of finding the right Pokemon to something that takes at most a few seconds, which is a really good change in my opinion. And one of the best changes by far, despite it being a generally minor change, was they changed how the bag worked. The bag is now first off divided into different sections for the different types of items. Now, this change might not seem like anything considering it's been like that since this generation, but in Generation 1, one of the biggest problems was you could have like 30 items total, and 20 of them were taken up by items that you pretty much couldn't give away. Meaning that you were basically stuck working with 10 items for your entire playthrough of that game, which made it so your bag was pretty much always full. On the other hand, not only are they now divided into separate sections in Generation 2, they also increased the amount of items that you could store in each of those sections, meaning you almost never max out your bag. There's also some really good gameplay changes. The first one being the physical special split. So a special stat is no longer both your special defense and attack. Now you have a special attack and a special defense, which helped all the Pokemon in the game feel a lot more balanced. This was also further helped by the weird change in learn sets. In the original Pokemon games, and even in the modern ones, you learn moves really fast. In Generation 2, for whatever reason, it takes forever to learn moves. For example, your starter Pokemon, Cyndaquil in my case, normally learns Ember at around level 8, 9, or maybe 10, depending on the mon. In this generation, I think it was like level 15. It took forever. And I didn't learn Flamethrower until level 60. Now, this might seem like a problem, and in every other Pokemon game, it would be. But Generation 2 also has something else that is very unique to it at the moment. At the time of this recording, it is the only Pokemon game to ever have more than one region. It had 2 different regions. It had the original Kanto region and the new Johto region. So having the levels this much more spaced out just made the game harder because you were stuck with weaker moves for longer, and it made you actually have to use other Pokemon. It made it so I was actually swapping around Pokemon a good amount, and I had a lot of a harder time with a lot of the battles, which I found to be a lot more fun, since for me, a lot of the more modern Pokemon games are super easy. On top of that, the new region they added, being the Johto region, is very well made. Basically, for every city in the region, they have a very unique design, and they base everything in that city, all the events, the buildings, the people in the city, the trainers surrounding it, around that city's design. Just off the top of my head, let's think of Olivine City. And if you ask me what that would be, I would instantly know that it's a port town. There's an event in that city where you go through a lighthouse and do some stuff. There's a boat there that is the boat that brings you between regions. Most of the area is surrounded by a beach. And a lot of the town is occupied by different sailors and fishers, which really just keeps that kind of port town type of vibe. And this is true for every single one of the cities in the Johto region, which makes it super memorable. And on top of that, it brought back the Kanto region. So after you get 8 gyms and battle the Elite Four per the usual, you then can re-experience the first region, but without the linearity. Something very interesting that they pretty much only have in Generation 2, there's almost nothing that forces you to go in a proper order of gyms or go in a linear path, especially in the new version of the Kanto region, which leads to a much more unique experience by the player. There's a couple exceptions, of course, like having to fight the main enemies of Team Rocket, but even then, you could either fight them right away, or you could sometimes even fight them as late as 2 gyms after you were supposed to have fought them. And whenever they introduce that roadblock that makes you have to go back and fight them, they make it very clear where you have to do that at. Now, of course, there were a few times that weren't like that. There was a few moments that I had to look up, but that's generally because I didn't talk to a lot of the NPCs. If this is your first time playing through the Generation 2 Pokemon games, you'll probably find yourself exploring and talking to all the different NPCs because they have a lot of very interesting things to say that help build up the world around you. And the only reason I wasn't talking to them is I've done this hundreds of times before, so I pretty much knew most of it. Meaning that I didn't get some crucial information that most of the NPCs actually told me, but I just mashed through. So, in general, the region's really well made, the battles are a lot more fun, and the UI and graphics just look a lot better and even kinda hold up in the modern day. On top of that, a lot of the newer Pokemon designs added were very solid. I would honestly say the designs added in Generation 2 were better than their counterparts in Generation 1. And this is made even more clear by the fact that Generation 2 had these little pre-battle animations that I failed to talk about earlier. Basically, every time that you encounter a Pokemon, whether it be a wild Pokemon battle or a gym or trainer battle, the enemy Pokemon does like a little 2-second animation that gives off a ton of character and personality about that Pokemon. Now, some of them are kinda weird, like Graveler here. I don't really know what they were thinking. But the majority of them are very, very kind of cutesy and memorable. And that's really the thing about this game. Everything in this game is super unique, well-designed, and kinda jam-packed. It's a very, very memorable experience, and I had a very fun time playing through the game. And this is made even better by the final thing that I failed to mention earlier, which is that the game doesn't waste your time. A lot of the more modern Pokemon games, and even a lot of the older ones, had these super long routes for absolutely no reason that were basically just empty. And you'd be walking like 20 tiles of grass for no reason other than making the game feel longer. Since Generation 2 has 2 entire regions and a bunch of side quests and other things for you to do, it doesn't feel the need to do that. And a lot of the routes in the game are only a few seconds long at most, especially if you have a repel. I found myself getting from area to area within like a minute or two, and I barely even realized I was going through the routes, as the game focused on the primary experiences of the towns and cities. Overall, I was surprised by how good Generation 2 was. I had a very fun time playing through this game, and it was significantly better than Generation 1. There's a reason I titled this video The Real Start of Pokemon, and that's because I think this is the first actual good Pokemon game in the series, despite the general opinion being that Generation 3 is really where it got started. All in all, this game is good. I don't know how much more I can say to really convince you otherwise. If you can find this game, under like $15, which you can do very easily nowadays, either the original release or one of the 3 different like virtual console releases that are like $8 to $10, I would recommend giving it a shot, especially if you haven't played the remakes of Generation 2, Heart Gold and Soul Silver. They're a very solid experience that you can find for cheap, and I would just recommend playing them. That being said, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.